my first passion in life, just to turn this into my podcast for a second.
Please. Hey, it ain't mine, so let's have it be yours.
First I got your voicemail, then I got you. We can meet in person or maybe on Zoom. So tell me what's your genre, tell me what do you do. I'd like to know the things that specifically make you you.
Hey, I'm Tim Barnes, you are the genre, and in every episode of this show, I ask a great new guest about the first genre that inspired them, the first craft that they pursued, and how they feel about that first pursuit now. Well, in this episode, my guest is technically me. I'm not interviewing myself. It's more that I am being interviewed by my friend Rob Schulte, who was one of the early guests on You Are the Genre. He is the producer of a podcast hosted by Mike Sachs called Doing It with Mike Sachs. And sometimes while Mike is away, Rob will take over. And in one of those Rob takeover episodes, he interviewed me. So in a way, this is sort of a Tim Barnes is the genre episode. And I think it also serves as the finale of season 1 of You Are the Genre. You Are the Genre will be back next year. I'm already recording episodes for that. But in the first year of anything, you start to realize things like, yeah, maybe there should be a bit of a cushion around the holidays where I'm not recording and editing and releasing episodes. So yeah, this will be an interview with me. It's also the finale of season 1 of You Are the Genre. And it's also right now, this is what it's right now, something that I'm calling the yearly nudge. It's just me expressing gratitude to those of you who have decided to pay for a newsletter subscription. There's a link to the You Are the Genre newsletter in your show notes and at youarethegenre.com. Free subscriptions to that newsletter give you updates on the latest publicly released episodes. But those of you who have upgraded to paid get advanced listens to episodes. You'll probably get those even during this hiatus and so much more. One of the things I do on this newsletter for everyone, free subscribers, is email 5 jokes a day by 11 a.m. Eastern. It's something that I genuinely enjoy doing. It's also a little bit of work, just like editing this podcast is a little bit of work. And on occasion, I have guest joke writers write 5 jokes for a full week. When I bring those writers on, I pay them for that week. The ability for me to pay them comes from those who have selected a paid subscription to the newsletter. So that's it. That's the nudge. You know, I don't want to do a full month of pledge driving or anything like that. But if you're in that sweet holiday spirit, just know that it would go a long way. All right, without further ado, this is Rob Schulte interviewing me on Doing It with Mike Sachs. Enjoy.
Welcome everyone to Doing It with Mike Sachs. We're bringing you a very special episode. Who am I? Well, I'm Mike's trusty producer, Rob Schulte, and I'm hijacking the podcast while Mike takes his private jet across this big blue globe in hopes of spreading his message. Let's waste no more time because this episode is a real roller rink pickle. Now, before we get to today's interview, I wanted to share with you some exciting news. On April 30th, 2024, a re-release of Mike's first book, and here's the kicker, is available to the world. This version has fresh material, more interviews, more advice, more fun. So either pre-order it or go buy it now, depending on when you're listening to this episode. I recently spoke with Tim Barnes, and he might be one of the funniest creators out there. He's written for television, has incredible podcasts, and is a stand-up comic who's so charismatic and funny, you may completely forget you're in a comedy show environment and think he's talking directly to you. And sometimes he is. Let's go to that interview now.
Your name isn't on the show.
I know.
Do you understand that?
Yes.
Are you that bitter podcast producer who a few years in thinks I can do this better than the host?
Everything needs to have big stakes these days.
Are you the type of person who thinks everything needs... that's one of the things I kind of I dislike is the urge that some people have to turn everything into a versus scenario. I feel like it's like the disease of capitalism where everything is who's better at this than the other person. It doesn't always have to be the case.
No, not at all. And coming from, so first of all, let me just put my foot down. I love Mike. I love him to death. And he is one of the best interviewers in existence. And I am lucky to be working on this podcast.
And one of the best people to answer questions, to be on the other end of the interview. Because I had him on You Are the Genre, and every time I asked a question, I was blown away by how succinctly, that's a word, right?
Yes.
Succinctly he responded. Like I could, whatever transcribes audio. What is the thing that's transcribing audio these days? What is it?
AI, I think. But there's a few things,
it
right? Like
disturbing how quick it is on an Instagram thing where you put up your... Yeah.
Yes. It is frightening, but you know what? If it helps me save 15 minutes, why not, right? Speaking, okay, so you've got the podcast, You Are the Genre. Mike was on it, I was on it, and a plethora of other incredible comedic minds have been on the show. Besides Mike and I, though, have there been guests that have, surprised you in a way? I don't want to say one guest is better than another, but has there been any, surprising revelations?
I will say that every single guest has surprised me, and this is a show that started in a frenzy of trying to figure out, what am I going to do next? I spent a lot of 2023, one, getting ready to get married, two, trying to figure out truly what my voice is, getting back in touch with my voice, because I had an amazing scenario where I had 3 writing jobs in a row without a gap in between, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
I get residuals for those. They weren't, straight to streaming. They were
unheard of.
Basic cable or NBC, But in the process, you really lose touch with, why did I get started in this? What is my voice? I spent working on these 3 different shows figuring out someone else's voice. And so that got me down the path of doing this newsletter. And in doing the newsletter and in doing something called... that I do these 3-day, mostly text message interviews with people. I kind of figured out the core 3 things that I want to find out from people, which is, what was the first thing that inspired you in your childhood? And what is your relationship with the first thing that you pursued and where you are now, career-wise? And so that's how I created this. You Are the Genre. It's just the idea that throughout the chaotic muck of whatever world we're in, where everyone has 3 gigs and you know what I mean?
Yes.
What is connecting this? And I think the only way to survive that is to realize that you are the thing connecting it. As long as you're tapping into the thing that truly motivates you, you're doing well. So I'm trying not to make it a cult. It sounds a little culty, but it's really just that phrase, because that phrase helps me, and I'm trying to, use that phrase to figure out how everyone else is navigating their lives, basically.
No, it makes so much sense, and it's a great podcast. It's a great thesis statement for, a podcast that then spirals off into your newsletter, which then also talks about the other interviews you did, like you said, with the text messages. It's an all-around great idea, and one thing from being on the podcast and, not just listening to everyone else's episodes, but specifically to bring it to Mike's episode, since we're on his podcast right now. Mike was listening to my episode.
I keep forgetting.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Mike's podcast.
Yeah.
Wow, you should really take over the show. Right?
Wow. Hey, I was joking at the beginning, but if you think so, I might.
Wouldn't it be great if the Tonight Show, listed who all the previous hosts were?
I love
it's the Tonight Show formerly starring Jack Parr.
Doing it with strike through Mike Sachs. Rob Schulte. But Mike texted me when my episode was out, and we were both talking about how, he and I have worked on this podcast off and on for, since 2015, 2016. There was some hiatus in there every now and again. But he was like, I can't believe my point was Twilight Zone and your point was Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Yeah, I thought seriously, okay, because, the Twilight Zone is surprisingly something that has come up more than once, and that has made me realize how much of a connection that there is to that type of television and people who just pursue comedy in general. But when you said Alfred Hitchcock Presents, I assumed you already knew what Mike's answer was.
Maybe I did, but that was
Are you trying to highlight some cosmic connection?
It's synergy, baby. We're just working together. No, I mean, I remember, I do say, like, I listened to your trailer, so I think Mike might have brought it up there, but going into your interview, like, that's the answer. Alfred Hitchcock Presents. You know what I mean? Like, even if that was not Mike's, like, that was such a pivotal thing in my youth, which people can go listen to You Are the Genre, which is linked in the show notes of this podcast, and listen to all the episodes. But yeah, that was a fun connection between me and Mike, but I have to think that, like, you're seeing those connections. You just said it yourself, like, the Twilight Zone has come up many times, but I wonder, like, you're generally falling within the same age group, right? Like, Mike's a little bit older than us. There's been people that are younger than us, but, like, we're kind of all at least in the same media world. And I have to think, like, more than just Twilight Zone, or like these things have come up but am I wrong?
No. A lot of similarities pop up, and I think specifically for people our age, what are we? Are we elder millennials?
I think I definitely am. But you might just be that clean cut millennial, the one everyone complains about, Tim. You know.
Well, like sort of like radio broadcasting is another one that's come up, and I think what's interesting about this age group of, like, of course, most of the people I interview are gonna kind of be my age. I just turned 35. We grew up in such a transition point, like a very specific transition point, and I think we're all waking up to kind of realizing why our parents' generation were so shocked all the time about certain advances. You know what I mean? We're having the modern equivalent of that. You're like, I remember when, so that is the fascinating thing, is that I think the secret purpose of the show is kind of tracking those little nuanced things that we forgot about on the path to the now, like the different the different ways that Facebook looked like. I'm fascinated by that, because Facebook is such an ugly website that has changed drastically from what it looked like when it first launched. But I don't think anyone has a solid memory of how drastic that is, because the site has remained ugly.
Yes. Now, I am such in a place where I have run the gamut of, like, being like, ooh, Facebook, it's the Facebook, and I can put, like, my class schedule in it. And then, and the wall was just like a notepad that other people could delete.
Yeah.
And to now, I think I've been off Facebook for almost 3 years now. Like, I had originally suspended my account, and then I fully deleted it last year. Like, and I think more and more people our age are doing that sort of thing. But that's neither here nor there. The technology aspect of it is wild, because, you're only a few years younger than me, but you probably still remember a time before having, like, a home computer, let alone a personal computer.
Yeah. I remember, when I finally got my own personal laptop, it being so confusing, or I think my parents couldn't fathom what I was doing for hours on my computer. I mean, it wasn't anything. Okay, you're giving this look. It wasn't
not a nefarious thing.
I was using it the way that I think anybody's ideal concept of sifting through mass information was. I was literally just learning random shit.
No, so was I. I mean, like, there was so much to access, but you didn't even know necessarily what it is. Like, you literally fell down rabbit holes, unlike Google rabbit holes now. But I found it so interesting. I still remember graduating high school, and, like, everyone was like, oh, what gift did your parents give you for graduating high school? I was like, nothing, and then I realized I was going to be going to community college, and I was like, Dad, people are getting gifts for graduating high school. Is there a way I could get, like, a laptop or something to take to community college? And this is 2004, right? And he's like, okay, I'll take you to Best Buy. And then he's like, looking at the price. He's like, I've never heard of anyone getting a high school graduation. Like, starts getting pissed once he sees like the sticker tag. And I was like, you don't have to do it, but this would be nice to have as I'm like going to higher education,
Going off into the world. Yeah.
But it also reminds me, and I don't know if you've seen this, but there was like a video going around recently at the time of this recording, everyone. Millennials are like the one generation, much like technology, that like have a unique connection to cigarettes, to where like
Interesting.
There's a world where you could still smoke in the country kitchen, you could still smoke in certain theaters. There were smoking sections, and then through our age group, it became like cigarettes are evil. We're banning them. No one should smoke. Yeah. It's bad. You're a bad person. You hate yourself, sort of advertising. And now it's like, well, we don't want to smoke a Juul or an e-cig because we also know that that's bad for you. But we might still smoke a cigarette after a night at the club because we just want to feel a little bit naughty,
Yeah, I have such vague memories of the smoking section in restaurants.
Yeah.
And it's weird because it was such a sign of adulthood, that I do think in some ways I want to know. I think Gen Z probably doesn't have this want to know what it feels like to smoke in a restaurant because they grew up when this was totally not a thing. Mm-hmm. But having just seen it, having seen, maybe my grandpa chose the smoking section. I want to know what it feels like to smoke in a steakhouse.
Yes. And like, it feels like what pairs best with what cigarette too, like, did you choose a cigar when you went to Outback or, but Tim, I wanted to ask you more about your experience. You talked about having those jobs where you were like, you had consistent work on television shows, but you're also a stand-up. So it feels like, I think, to the outside person who enjoys like watching comedy in one way, shape, or form, that maybe that's a natural progression. But did you see that for yourself? Like, because I know when we met, we were just like, how do we get jobs?
Yeah.
But you had been doing stand-up for quite some time. Is that when you moved to New York and we met, was the idea to get on a TV show writing job?
Yeah, I think in many ways the idea was to get on a TV show writing job, but I still had a lot of things just tethered to a system of stand-up that was kind of disintegrating, as many elements of things have been disintegrating lately. My first passion in life, just to turn this into my podcast for a second.
Please. Hey, it ain't mine, so let's have it be yours.
No. The first thing I wanted to do was to be a filmmaker because I loved science fiction. And I think I kind of discovered that I wanted to be a filmmaker because I was always reading things like the novelization of Flubber. I loved going to the movies was my favorite thing. And it's as soon as I realized that there was someone crafting it, and specifically once I became a massive Star Wars fan, and I grew up in South Central LA, just a couple blocks away from USC. So already, like, the legend is national and worldwide about George Lucas. But because I was so close to this school, which this famous monotone, nerdy, quiet, shy filmmaker invented this massive thing, I was just really drawn to that, whatever that thing was, the sort of myth around George Lucas. And in high school, I started to slowly get this interest in comedy, and I kind of ended up in this ragtag group of friends who just loved making each other laugh and just like gathering around the school before school started. And I can't explain it, but it really was just like this core dream scenario of making people laugh. And I still think a lot of those friends in high school are just some of the funniest people I've ever known. And in every part of my life since, I'm trying to recreate that, basically, because I know what it feels like when you're just riffing in a very genuine way and you're one-upping each other, but you're kind of creating this collective vision. And so that's, something that I later was like, I got to feel that writing for certain TV shows. But yeah, stand-up became just this vague interest of mine. I think because I started to get into, filmmakers who started off as stand-ups, for instance. And I took some film classes at Santa Barbara City College. That's where I went after high school because they had a good film program. And then I kind of fizzled out of that. And then I started working at this movie theater. I moved back with my parents and started working at this movie theater. And I would be reading a lot of books, like the Del Close book about improv and stuff. And I would religiously watch Conan's TBS show. And that's another thing, too. Like, Conan O'Brien felt like a discovery for me in high school in particular. I think because I finally got a TV in my bedroom.
Yes.
And so I still say the two greatest discoveries in my life were when I discovered the Power Rangers in elementary school and when I discovered Late Night with Conan O'Brien. Because it was like, oh, now I understand what late night is.
Yes.
I would always, certain family members loved David Letterman or whatever. But something about actually staying up at night to watch this thing where this guy pulls a lever and there's a random Chuck Norris thing or whatever. I think whatever that was what got me interested in it, in comedy in general. And so I kind of just wanted to get to that standard idea of, like, you do stand up, you create a persona, you have a great set on a TV show that's your entrance to the world. And that's all that I really knew that I wanted. But of course, as I enter this, it's slowly starting to fall apart. And I think by the time we met in New York, I was kind of in an in-between phase of, like, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I just know how to do all these different things. I don't know what the through line of it all is.
Yep, I know that.
Really, it's a really insecure feeling. And that's another reason why I started You Are the Genre, is to kind of overcome that feeling, which is really just an uncertainty around other people's ability to label you. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. Very much so.
But I have Forrest Gumped my way into a lot of exciting things, and I feel more confident about all the things that I do than ever. It's just ironic that this confidence comes at a time of supreme unemployment in any of those areas.
It's terrifying, I know, but it is one of those things where, like, you have the skills, right? And I'm speaking from personal experience as well. Like, you know that, like, just give me a shot, just let me do the thing and I can do it. But, like, there's all of this other bullshit that I know we talked about as well whenever, we were both, like, out of work in 2017 or whatever. But, like, there was so much, what do we do? Why is it hard? Just, like, the hard part is getting the foot in the door. And now that we even have the foot in the door, it still is like, what do I have to prove? I've done all of this stuff for you.
Well, that's the thing. I think something in hindsight, we were in the glory days of all of these random new media jobs. Yeah. Everyone knew that something internet connected was going to be the future of their website, their brand, their company, or whatever. And podcasting was new, so there were all these opportunities. The only thing is, all of those opportunities were trying to figure out how to be cheaper than the older ones.
Yes.
By a massive, massive margin. So there was no defined career path as it once existed. So I think the two of us learned that we have to kind of, have a little bit of wet concrete behind us to make our own path for ourselves. Yeah.
Well, and it is interesting because you have all of these different writing abilities and they all, like, inform the other one. And it's not like I did stand up, so that means I can write TV, which means I can have a podcast, which means I can have a newsletter. It's like I have the newsletter, which means I could have a podcast, or I could do stand-up, or I could, like, there's no through line. It's just all of these things work interchangeably together. But a direct question for you, it's not like, what do you like most, but what do you feel like A is one of your stronger points, but then also which one of your strong or your writing abilities do you think helps propel the other?
Stand-up has oddly been the thing that has helped propel me the most. Maybe not oddly. I think that's maybe not surprising, but the beauty of stand-up is that you don't need much production to do it. You just need to go on stage and at least stand-up is really turning yourself into a reliable animatronic. You build up, you set up some material. There are a few varying factors, but the ability to consistently, tell this joke and make it kill is the name of the game. And so I know directly that when I got my first staff writing job, it was like a mix of I had amassed a certain amount of various strange behind the scenes credits. Uh-huh. I had a solid stand-up clip, and then I had made some sketches. Like my job before that was working as a digital writer at the company Comedy Central, but I had made some sketches there that I could point to that has the official Comedy Central brand and say so they can look at that. So it was more the ability to look at something that wasn't a script, that was complete, that got me into having an interview. But I think trying to think on that broader scale, all of the chaos of the strikes and things, and me waking up and being like, I'm losing touch of kind of why I started doing this, what I genuinely want to do, because I was getting to this point where, if I really wanted to, I could, and I say this with no, I've never met Jimmy Fallon in person. I say this with no malice for Jimmy Fallon, but I could sell my soul and just do the grind of the work to work at this job forever, which has a pretty decent paycheck. And so I was feeling a bit of that ticking clock of I only have so many more years where I can take leaps of faith based off of my personal impulses. And the danger was I had really forgotten what those personal impulses were. So things like the newsletter and stuff, it's more just trying to get consistent with writing, trying to rediscover what my motivations are. So it's some of it is a little bit more personal journal. Some of it is really just writing, being consistent with writing 5 jokes a day. And all with this sort of community aspect of hopefully welcoming people in to be if you're as confused as I am about what is happening in the world, and how you can possibly what is a career when careers aren't a thing, you know what I mean? That's what that is all about. So I don't know if I answered your question. What I think my skills as a writer are being able to put a little bit of real emotion into a high concept. I think my greatest skill in a writer's room is the ability to not have a bloated ego in the space. I think I kind of blend into the background in a way that sometimes I dislike how much, no one will remember that it's me who pinpointed this great connection or who made this, you know what I mean? But that's also my skill, is that I do think that I kind of, I can't do characters. I can't, I just know how to say the right thing at the right time. Like I said, George Lucas, very monotone, quiet person. But the beauty of that is that when you say the right thing at the right time, that makes the right points of connections fire. I'm good at that thing, whatever that is.
I totally get you. But also knowing where your strengths are, because I am not good at stand-up. Did I try stand-up? Yes. But I also not to necessarily bring it back to me, but just out of an example, because I think there are other listeners out there who feel like they need to be absolutely perfect at everything, but you don't. You just need to know where those strengths lie, right? There's always going to be a louder person there. There's always going to be someone that's better in one aspect at something. Was I good at stand-up? No. Am I good at punching things up or making things weird? Yes, right? And you don't punch up a stand-up set while you're doing it, right? Oh, let me take that joke back again and rethink it. or fix someone else's joke while they're on stage, right? It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But you knowing that, like, you know, maybe I'm not going to be the person who's everyone's like turning their chairs to and this one show for the connection, but knowing you are there to make the joke. It does get annoying when people say it louder and then they get the credit for it. But you know your strength. And that is something I think young writers and people coming up and just trying to find a career in general, doesn't even have to be comedy. Doesn't even have to be writing. Like, you have to at least know where your strengths lie. And the other thing that, like, I think we've been tiptoeing around a lot in your story and my story, and the idea of like having 3 jobs to just have one job, is that everything you do to apply for a job online is pretty much bullshit. I've had someone who like chats with me a lot, like they're trying to get a job. They don't know. Yeah. They didn't even know that you could get credits on Google for certificates. And if they would have known that, they wouldn't have spent, 4 years in college. And I was like, it's all bullshit. Like, yes, it's good to have on your LinkedIn page or whatever. But like, Mike said this to me: if you want to be in podcasting and you want to get a job at like Gimlet or whatever at the time, they're not going to hire you if they don't know you. There's this insane networking game that like is such a delicate balance of being a good person, but also being able to put yourself out there. And I think you're really good at being able to do both of those things. Like, you're not afraid to ask the questions, ask the guests, ask what you can do to help with something. You did a stand-up show with Z-Way. We ran a show together for at the Bell House with like Roy Wood Jr. and Robin Thede. Like, I say it was your show. I was just helping with logistics.
You're a big part of it. Like, I truly, Rob, when I got to New York, I was not, and I think we've talked about, that I was not in a good
neither one of us was.
Neither one of us were. And you were a nice mental saving grace, because I was just very... and especially being so young, I had this podcast called It's All True. And so, a lot of this, let me just backtrack a little bit, because a lot of what you're saying is things that I learned in Chicago, which I moved there from California in 2012 with my friend Ian Abramson. We went to high school together. He's part of that group of friends that was like, we were just like comedic gold. I really, I really think
when you and Ian came through Kansas, when I was still living in Kansas, I was just like, these are the funniest motherfuckers that have ever toured our small town, like,
and it was
comedy
really
venue, right?
But it was us trying to. I think when we are both together, we are trying to. We just have this this understanding, and we've known each other for so long. But we're always trying to recreate what we had in high school, which is this ability to point out how absurd everything is.
Yes.
And bring everybody inside on the joke, and we're all just kind of laughing at it, and it's just propelling and propelling. But when I got to when I got to Chicago, it was vaguely like I had done a couple open mics and stuff in California, and I was doing it without any pomp and circumstance. I wasn't letting my family know. I was just going to like music open mics and stuff. And Ian had started doing that as well around the same time. And we just kind of, I had gone through that thing where I stopped going to City College. I was kind of miserable living with my parents, working at this movie theater. Sadly, I just, eating cornflakes at, midnight, watching Conan sets, and, but really being, invested in the new crop of, comedians like, Ron Funches and stuff, who would pop up there. So we hatched this plan to move to Chicago, and I had saved up probably a little less than $2,000, and I didn't have any direct job prospects. And we hopped on a plane. We both found places to live, And we were just, it just sounds so crazy, but it really was just like, we're just going to figure this out. And if I'm nostalgic about anything, it really is that feeling.
Yeah.
And the more that I think about it, when I talked about how detached I was from like the impulse, like, why am I doing this? I've gotten detached from that feeling a little bit of just like, I just want whatever it is to make it,
Yeah.
But so it was like I still wanted to be a filmmaker. I still really wanted to do comedy. I was going to give improv a try. It was also Barack Obama's hopeful first term of as president.
We all remember it.
So that was in the air, and that really was such a big thing in the background of like, well, Barack Obama moved to Chicago and got into this grassroots movement, and it's like Chicago was just like something I was reading about on multiple levels, and so I was excited, one, to invent myself, not even to reinvent myself, just to invent myself, and to feel like I got ingrained into a city, because I was a pretty sheltered kid in LA, and I don't feel that sort of, that pride that people have about their hometowns. I never had that. So I was excited to try and figure out how to do that in Chicago. And it was just a bunch of happy, weird circumstances where, like, me going out at night to do stand-up. I remember, one of Ian's, the girlfriend of one of Ian's roommates was like, well, you should just do volunteer stuff. So I remember like looking up some stuff on volunteermatch.org. And
that old website
started doing some free volunteer work for, I think, the Polish Museum or something, which was like, so when you volunteer at some of these events, there's like free food. So that's a perk. And then in doing that, there was something that they had at one of the WBEZ bureaus in Chicago. I don't know if they still have this, but WBEZ, the public radio station there, they have these bureaus, or at least they had these bureaus in every neighborhood. So in doing that, I met someone who was like one of the people involved in organizing volunteers at WBEZ. That sort of things. This could go on forever.
Hey.
But all I can say is that multiple things like that is what guided me towards, eventually having a podcast. I was in the WBEZ podcast network, like little strange, bizarre points of connection that are just from the friction of being active in a city.
And that's the thing, like you can't, the person who's forcing their networking or whatever, right? And it feels like when you're in those zones, we both worked at a bagel shop. We've both worked at like jobs that we don't want while we're trying to do the other thing. But volunteering somewhere or going to some like meetup event or doing something where you're just like, I just want to meet people. Like, I'm not going to try and force that, like, I do comedy. Do you need someone to do comedy for you? Like, it doesn't work that way. But there is so much that, like, it's a little bit out of every pool. And I only like to, like, overly explain these things because no one taught me anything, Tim. And I feel like you kind of have that same vibe. It's like, I just need to go out and do it. I need to be hopeful. And you make such a good point about the more aged you get, the less it feels good to take risks. And, and being able to, the same thing when I moved to New York was just like, if I don't do it now, I am not going to do it. It was that threshold, right? And I was hopeful, and it was right around, the second term, and and we,
that was around the end of it. It was like, it was like, but her emails era.
Yes, I like, if I don't do it now, it ain't happening. Like, I gotta get out of here. You don't have to get paid. You don't have to be in the spotlight to get to that next level. The people who wait around to be asked to be on a stand-up show, and I'm just bringing this back to our Bell House show. Yeah, you'll get asked to be on shows every now and again, but when you start throwing your own show, it becomes easier to just make those connections, do more shows, get more stage time, leads to the writing job, leads to this other thing. And it doesn't have to, right? That's the other thing. You can just do stand-up to have fun. You could just write a newsletter to have fun, right? It doesn't have to have a job tied to it. But if you want to, Like, no one's stopping you from emailing the venue and saying, can we book a show this night?
Yeah. And honestly, because you mentioned the newsletter, I think what it really is getting back to the point where you remember that you simply enjoy doing this thing.
Yes.
Like, I think we kind of get caught up in like, well, what is this going to get me? And who is going to validate it? But a part of it, you have to never forget that that you simply enjoy. If you simply enjoy writing, you should keep doing that.
Yeah.
No one is stopping you from doing that. And if you are doing it from an honest space, that's better than doing it from the space of, well, I saw that this is trending, and I think that if this person sees, you know what I mean?
Yep. I only use social media to tweet political jokes. Like, it's my favorite thing to do. Hey, some people are really good at it, but it is one of those things where it's like you do have to like also do the thing that you want to do, not just like if it comes to you naturally, do it. Tim, I think we've had a well-rounded conversation here, but
have we? I feel like I've let you down, Rob.
Hell no! This is
I've been very rambling.
No. This is wonderful. But we're also going to take this moment where you can, like, is there anything we didn't touch on? Anything you want to bring up? And also, got to get those links, man. You got to tell people where to find you.
Well, for the You Are the Genre podcast, you can get everything you need there at youarethegenre.com. I'm trying to figure out how to do merch. That's something I want to do for the show. And everything else about me, you can find at timbarnescomedy.com, including links to my Letters from African America newsletter. That's the main one. It's based off of my first ever joke that became a staple of my stand-up set. And another newsletter called Alternate Timeline, where I write experimental science fiction short stories. But I guess, I want to get back into, if there's anything we missed, I do want to just highlight that, I think the reason that on my end, I feel like I've been really bad at answering your questions is that I am still the most distant from stand-up than I've ever been. Like I'm not as connected to that in particular as I was in the past, and I think that that's just because the things surrounding stand-up are changing to such a degree. And I was really stuck on that idea of having a sort of grand entrance through stand-up, be it a Conan O'Brien show or something like that. And with the current state of media, there are just thousands of tinier entrances. Mm-hmm. So I have to, shrink and duplicate myself. And I think that thing is it has kind of broken my brain a little bit. And so, and has made me focus more on the writing, because I think that's just a little more my speed. I think a little of the stand-up energy channeled into the writing is going to be my focus from now on. I think I'm not doing stand-up. It's just the motivating factor of it has changed.
Well, I think if anyone's wondering, if you want to get a taste of Tim's joke style, his newsletter does have 5 jokes every day. So the writing is there. The writing is on the screen, as they say. And see, that's what I do, folks. But I get where you're coming from, and I think it makes sense. But here's a little tip: stand-ups these days, Tim, they are getting videos of them doing crowd work. And and you're not doing that. Yeah. So I think you are. I think you're in a good spot. I'm not trying to be too shitty.
No.
That is the trend.
No. You're right. You're right. But and the other thing is, I am mainly, I think, an introvert, and you really have to both go on the train and socialize and be an active member of the comedy community to stay at it. And there's always new comedians. There's always new people to meet and introduce yourself and prove how on the level you are. And that gets that gets a little exhausting too. So I was hoping, you know what? I think I can make this TV thing work. And then there were the strikes, and less shows are being made. And so
I've got a good feeling about this Tim Barnes guy. I think there'll be.
I think I'll figure it out. It's just, there's what's going on.
Yeah,
what's happening.
That is very true, because if you were to tell me that I would go from a comedy podcasting job to like an architecture and design podcasting job, while in my free time podcasting about reality TV, like, what is going on? Like, I don't know what's going on. But I promise you, Tim, and maybe this is my me speaking in a weird thing about me, but like, I always feel like, shit, if I can do it, Tim Barnes can fucking do it. And it's gonna happen.
And that's why I'm working on my magnum opus right now. I'm really proud of this. I'm pitching it to networks, and everyone I show it to says it's great. And I'm in talks to get Liam Neeson and Denzel Washington to merge themselves in this hybrid machine to act in it. So yeah, things are coming up. You can probably see my stuff on FX tomorrow.
Wow.
I mean, that's how quick things are. I don't use any AI, but I'm just a really quick writer and quick producer. So everything's wonderful right now. How about you, Rob?
Couldn't have said anything better than myself. I'm working on a TV show too, but it can't compare to the Denzel Liam machine that you have created. So, well, Tim, thanks for joining me, man. And I look forward every day to voting on which joke I think is best.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Doing It with Mike Sachs. I want to thank the Sonar Network for allowing this podcast to spread its wings, the hilarious Tim Barnes for sitting down and chatting with me, and of course Jack Allison and Kate Shapiro for asking me to produce the audiobook of Kill the Rich. Oh yeah, and thanks Mike Sachs for letting me pinch hit this episode while you are gallivanting across the world. So until next time, keep reaching for the stars and crunching that pickle.
So, do you like Grandma's pancakes?
Yes, Grandma. They're delicious.
Oh, good, because you're going to get them every morning now that Mommy's going back to work.
A steady chicken holidays equal nothing but cash. And I ain't about that, bro.
Bro?
It's a new thing I'm trying out.